Hi, welcome to Spooked with Emma. I'm Emma and this is part 5 of the last 6 days. There'll be 12 parts altogether, so if you enjoy this, please subscribe so you don't miss anything. And if you can't wait for the next part, you can also buy the paperback and the ebook in the link in the description below. It took me a few seconds when I woke up to work out where I was and remember what had happened. My heart sank as it all came back. I didn't know what to do. I couldn't stay in this apartment, but I needed to work out some sort of plan because I certainly couldn't keep sleeping on the street. It was weird. In the daytime, this place didn't seem scary at all, apart from the cockroaches. But now there was no doubt in my mind that I hadn't imagined what had happened and that something was haunting this house. It still made no sense though. Why would ghosts target me? I hadn't done anything to make them angry, had I? Then it occurred to me that maybe the ghost needed my help. People sometimes say that when you die you can't move on if you have things you needed to do but didn't do while you were alive. And that's why ghosts haunt the places where they died. And I've seen loads of films where that happens too. The characters just have to find out what the ghost wants and do it, and everything turns out fine. Maybe I just happened to move into an apartment where there were ghosts waiting for someone to arrive and help them, and maybe if I could find out who they were and what they wanted, then I could stop this from happening. It was probably something simple, like in the story about the portrait that nobody was allowed to move. Maybe I'd accidentally moved something when I moved in. I couldn't think of what it could be though, but the ghosts were clearly upset about something. I just needed to work out what it was and how to make them stop. The problem was that the only way I could think of to find out what I needed to do was to somehow ask the ghost, but I was too scared to try and communicate, and I didn't have the first idea how to communicate with ghosts anyway, especially when they could probably only speak Spanish. Maybe I needed to find a priest and ask them to do an exorcism. Do they really happen in real life? I thought they probably didn't, but then again a couple of days ago I had thought that ghosts probably didn't exist either. But even if I found a priest and managed to explain all this, they'd just think I was crazy. So it made more sense to me to try to help the ghosts myself so they could rest in peace. And really, ghosts are just people who happen to have died, right? Most people aren't that scary. I just had to work out what to do next. I decided I would be able to think more clearly outside this apartment. I felt like the ghosts were always around here, watching me all the time. I got dressed and ready to go out much more calmly than the day before. I felt a bit different today, now that I'd started to think of the ghosts as just people who needed my help instead of evil creatures who were out to get me. I wasn't so scared. I surprised myself by even being able to shower properly without jumping out every 5 seconds because I thought I heard something, although I was still quite worried about that cockroach coming back up through the plug hole. Nothing unusual happened, and maybe even if it had, I wouldn't have felt as scared as I had done before. Well, probably I would have done, but at least I was feeling slightly more confident about sorting all of this out. It's hard to believe how naive I was just a few days ago. I really thought that all I needed to do was to solve the mystery of what the ghost wanted from me, and then all of this would somehow be okay. Or maybe I was right, but I should have just been better at working out what it was that the ghost wanted. Then I wouldn't be in this situation. But there's no point thinking about what I should have done differently. I can't change anything now. I put on a navy and white striped maxi dress that I bought on my first day here and left the apartment, this time walking in a different direction to before, thinking that way I would discover more of the city. I passed more cafes, clothes shops, bakeries, a fancy dress shop. Eventually I came to an open area with various streets coming off it in every direction. It was the busiest place I'd seen so far in Madrid. There were people everywhere. Outside a bakery called La Mallorquina, there were some buskers dressed as Native Americans playing the panpipes. Not very Spanish, I thought, and lots of people crowded around watching them. Further along, opposite a shop that seemed to sell nothing except fans, I couldn't imagine a shop like that existing anywhere other than in Spain, or maybe Japan. There was a statue of someone on a horse, who I imagine must be a king, and another statue not far from it, of a bear standing on its tiptoes to reach a tree. I couldn't make sense of that one at all. Were bears even native to Spain? Lots of people crowded around both the monuments. They were probably meeting friends, and these were popular meeting points. Although how he'd ever find anyone with 300 people in the way was beyond me. Anyway, I quite liked the bear. It was a bit more fun than most other statues, even though I couldn't work out what it had to do with anything. I kept on walking in a random direction. I thought I must have chosen the wrong street to go down, because quite a few of the shops had obviously closed down and were boarded up with to let signs. But then I came to a busy square with lots of people sitting outside in bars. One side of the square was taken up by a huge white building. It was so stunning that I thought it must be a palace or some kind of historical building, but it actually turned out to be a hotel. In fact, I realised it was part of the same chain as a hotel that had opened quite recently near Covent Garden. I'd been to its rooftop bar before for a party, and it was a really nice place with amazing views over London. I'd been meaning to go and stay there one night to see what it was like. I used to like going to London hotels sometimes, just for a night or two, because it made me feel like I was on holiday. But now I'll never have the chance. For a minute I thought I could just check into this lovely hotel, and then I wouldn't have to worry about any of these crazy problems. I had the money, so why not? Whatever it cost, it would be worth it to escape from all of this. I can't remember why I can't just go there now. Maybe I just didn't think of it before. I can just go back and then everything will be fine. Oh, except I need to work out how to get out of this bed when I can't move my legs. Of course, I remember now. I thought that if I just went and stayed in that hotel, I wouldn't have to go looking for a priest to do something about the ghost, and I wouldn't have to tell anyone what was happening and make myself look crazy, and I wouldn't have to try and work out what was happening in the apartment and why. I could just forget about all of it, and it would be as though it had never happened. I walked up the steps and through the door into the lobby. It was beautiful from the outside and just as impressive inside, exactly the kind of place I liked staying in. I started walking towards the desk, but a powerful feeling stopped me. I felt like I couldn't just go to a hotel. I was too involved and I needed to work out what was happening in that apartment. I'd already walked in now though, and I couldn't just turn around and walk straight back out again. That would look really weird. Any moment now, someone would come and ask if they could help me and I wouldn't know what to say. I don't know why I was panicking about it so much, maybe just lack of sleep, but I was glad when I noticed the bar through a door on my right. I could just go in there and it would look as though that's what I'd come in for. I walked in and a pretty smiley girl showed me to a booth and gave me a menu. She somehow knew where I was from and spoke to me in English. Maybe people who work in hotels get good at working out where people are from just by looking at them. Or maybe I just look really English, I don't know. Once, when I was walking down the King's Road, a man stopped me and just started talking to me in Russian or Polish or some language like that I didn't understand. He didn't even ask me first whether I spoke it, so I always thought I must look Eastern European. But maybe he just didn't know any English and was going up to everyone and speaking to them in his own language and hoping that at some point someone would understand. That's what I should have done in Madrid, but how could I have known? I ordered a drink, an orange juice that I thought might give me some nutrition since I'd hardly eaten. I was so tired and anxious that just walking around was making me feel lightheaded, but I still didn't feel in the mood for eating. The bar was basically empty, except for a man sitting on his own reading a newspaper and having a croissant and coffee for breakfast. He was wearing a suit, so I assumed he was on a business trip. My dad used to go on a lot of business trips when I was younger, partly to find new ingredients or supplies and get inspiration for new recipes when he was still more involved in running the business, and partly to spend more time with his PA Linda, who he had an affair with for quite a few years. Really, I thought my mum shouldn't have told me that, but she's never seemed too concerned about upsetting me. She was probably jealous that I've always been closer to him, and was trying to make me think less of him. But to be honest, I didn't blame him. My mum's not the easiest person to put up with, and I think he struggled while I was at boarding school and they were left alone together for most of the year. I met Linda a few times. She struck me as the typical PA men always have an affair with, voluminous blonde hair with a fringe. Why do men always have affairs with women with fringes? Does it make you irresistible to men? I should have got one. Too late now, though. Shirts unbuttoned too low to be appropriate for the workplace. Pencil skirts, patent heels, whatever jewellery my dad had bought her, 5 years older than his daughter. In some ways I was disappointed he didn't have more imagination, but most people do seem to live up to stereotypes, I suppose. I always wondered whether she liked my dad in particular, or whether she would have had an affair with whoever her boss was if it got her some nice gifts and meant she didn't have to do much work. Anyway, she seemed like a pleasant woman whenever I met her, and at least it distracted my dad from his unhappy marriage, in the same way my mum's plastic surgery and shopping addictions did for her. They've been on their cruise for about 3 weeks now, and I can guarantee they won't have said more than 10 words to each other. I can't imagine them ever having been in love, but they must have been in the beginning, I guess. That always scared me about getting married. The way people can go from being obsessed with each other to being completely indifferent. Well, I don't need to worry about it now. I think that's why I was always attracted to men who were indifferent to me from the start, because I didn't need to worry about them falling out of love with me if they never loved me anyway. For a while I thought I might get married to Ben. Sometimes we used to talk about it, but we'd always end up arguing because he wanted it in Hello so he could get more exposure, and I didn't want journalists choosing my wedding dress and forcing me to have bridesmaids from Hollyoaks because they didn't want anyone in the pictures who isn't famous. To be honest, I don't know who I would have chosen as bridesmaids. I don't have any sisters, and I've never really had that many close female friends. There are plenty of girls I see at parties or go shopping with, and I guess I'd call them friends, but I wouldn't tell them my deepest secrets or anything like that. I've never really opened up to anyone, to be honest. In fact, I think this might be the most open I've ever been, which is sad. Maybe if I had had a best friend, then this wouldn't have happened. I wouldn't have had to come here, or if I had, it would have been with her and not on my own, and things never would have turned out like this. I started feeling sick quite quickly. I wondered whether orange juice could make you ill. I didn't think it was likely, so I decided it must be the stress or lack of sleep. That would hardly be surprising given the circumstances. I managed to ignore it for a few minutes, but when I got that feeling in the back of my jaw, the one you get right before you vomit, I had to run to the bathroom. I was sick 3 times in the toilet, but it didn't make me feel any better. I still felt nauseous and I was dizzy and sweating, so I sat on the toilet floor for a few minutes until I was sure I wasn't going to be sick again and could stand up without fainting. I needed to get back to my apartment and rest. It would be fine during the day, there was nothing to worry about, and I didn't feel well enough to stay out. I went up to the bar and paid the bill, and then set off back to the apartment. I was trying to work out whether something I'd eaten had made me ill, but I couldn't even remember what I'd had to eat or when. It's so horrible being sick, I wish I could stop now, and it's even worse now, because I can't move, and the bedsheets are covered with it, and my hair is covered with it, and I don't know how it's even possible for it to keep happening when surely there can't be anything left. The smell is just horrendous. I can hardly even bear to breathe it in, and I wish I could get away from it, but it's impossible. I managed to get back to the apartment only being sick in the street once. People looked at me as though it was my fault, but I don't know what I could have done to avoid it, and I did do it against the wall so that people wouldn't tread in it. For the first time since I'd been in Madrid, when I got back to the apartment, I was glad to be back. I lay down on the bed and vaguely noticed that the cockroach I'd killed last night and never cleaned up had now disappeared from the floor, but I wasn't alert enough to question it. I needed a glass of water so badly, but I was confused about what had happened the night before. And anyway, I wouldn't be able to get to the sink without treading on the broken glass I'd left on the floor. I wouldn't mind the broken glass now. If only I could put my feet on the floor and walk to the kitchen, I would happily shred my feet to get a glass of water so I could at least swallow normally. But at that time I just wanted to rest. I closed my eyes and fell asleep immediately. I only had one dream, about sitting on a beach somewhere in the pouring rain with one of my boarding school teachers, Mrs. Cook, who used to teach art, and she was making models out of the wet sand, really intricate things like a man playing the piano or 2 sleeping otters holding hands. They do it so that they don't drift apart, one of my favourite facts from when I was alive, even though I don't remember her being particularly good at that kind of thing. As far as I can remember, all she used to do was weird things like tying shells to trees using clear threads so they looked like they were floating, but maybe that was another dream. And then I was eating the sand sculptures and they made me feel really sick. That's what woke me up and I ran to the toilet and was sick again. I was so tired that when I'd finished I stayed sitting on the bathroom floor and rested my head on the toilet seat. I had no energy to get up. I even closed my eyes again, but I didn't sleep this time. I had the worst headache I'd ever had up until then, probably from dehydration. I wanted to stand up and drink some water from the bathroom sink, but I was so weak that I was shaking. I closed my eyes again. When I opened them, I saw something moving on the chair in the corner. Another cockroach. I didn't know if it was a dream and I was just remembering when it happened before, but I was definitely awake. I needed to get up and kill it, but I just needed to rest for a little while longer. I would keep my eyes open in case it moved, and then when I felt well enough to stand up, I would go and kill it. And then I would drink some water, and then I would get back to bed and rest until I was better. I watched it for some time, a few minutes I guess. It stayed still sitting on the chair. Then I told myself that the sooner I got up, the sooner I could go back to bed and the sooner I wouldn't be ill anymore. But as soon as I stood up, it ran down the side of the chair and scuttled across the floor and disappeared into the wall. I wanted to work out where it had gone, but I didn't want to get too close and risk it touching me. I couldn't see where it could be. Maybe it had gone behind the skirting board. I couldn't just leave it there, but I needed to get back into bed. I still couldn't stand, so I crawled over to the wall. It must be somehow squished behind there, hiding in between the skirting board and the wall, so I needed something to prise off the skirting board with. I picked up a flip-flop that was lying on the floor and tried to use that, even though I knew it wouldn't be strong enough. But when I went to try and lever the skirting board away from the wall, part of it just came away with no effort at all. and behind it wasn't the wall, but a gap. I made the risky move of laying my head on the floor to see if I could see it, even though I knew it could jump out at any moment and run onto my face, which was probably the worst thing I could imagine at the time. I couldn't see the cockroach, but what I could see was a pile of books. Who would put books behind a wall? It seemed so weird. I thought an old tenant must have left them there and then forgot them when they moved out. I was intrigued, so I reached into the gap and brought out the books. The cockroach was nowhere to be seen. It could be anywhere by now if it had got into the wall cavity. They were notebooks, 8 of them, all different. Some had hardcovers and others had paper covers. They were all different colours and patterns, and some were larger than others. I opened the first one at the beginning. It seemed to be some kind of journal with handwritten notes in Spanish that went on for most of the pages. The thing that struck me as a bit odd was that the writing started off quite neatly, but as the book went on it got messier and messier until the final pages were just a scroll. It was impossible to even work out what most of the letters were meant to be, and the writing went almost diagonally across the page. I looked at the others and they were all the same, except the handwriting was different. 8 different journals that must have been written by 8 different people, and all of them just ended in a big mess. I couldn't understand what any of it meant, but even then I realised that if I could just work out what they said, these notebooks would help me work out what I needed to do to get rid of the ghosts. If only I spoke Spanish or knew someone who did, because as hard as I tried, I couldn't make any sense of anything that was written in them. Even then, I knew that these notebooks were the key to understanding what was happening in this place. I needed to get a dictionary from somewhere, and then at least I might be able to work out the key words. Then I might have a clue about what the ghost wanted me to do, and I could just do it, and the ghost could be at peace, and I could be normal and happy again. I felt like I'd already been here so long. Even though this was only my 3rd day, I couldn't even remember feeling normal or happy. Maybe I never had been. Maybe it had always been like this. I couldn't remember anything anymore. I needed to talk to someone, but there was no one.